Hello, I'm Joe Walensky from WritersUA, and I'm visiting with some of the many presenters who will be at our WritersUA West event coming up in Palm Springs in March. I'm visiting now with Everett McKay. Hello, Everett. How are you?
Hello, Joe. I'm doing well, thank you.
And where are you speaking to us from?
I'm from the beautiful town of St. Albans, Vermont.
All right. Well, hopefully, it hasn't. Have you gotten the frigid temperatures there?
Well, the weather hasn't been all that great, but for us, it's kind of normal here. So
Oh,
it really
that's
hasn't been the extreme that it's been elsewhere. This is kind of typical for Vermont this time of year.
Well, if you're not familiar with Everett, he is the principal of the company UX Design Edge, which is a UX design training and consulting company. He worked for many years at Microsoft, where he was responsible for putting together the Windows user experience guidelines and taught their introductory UI design course. And he's written a book, UI is Communication: How to Design Intuitive, User-Centered Interfaces by Focusing on Effective Communication. Everett will be making a couple of presentations in Palm Springs. Everett, let's start with UI is Communication. Give us a taste of that session.
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I've wrote a book with that title. So there's many ways that I like to think about the concept behind the book. There's a lot of training that kind of talks about the secrets of certain things, like you might have the secrets of cooking or the secrets of barbecue or whatever. And the interesting thing about those types of information is there's not really any secrets. There's kind of like insights or tips or whatever. But when I think about the concept of this book, I think there really is kind of a secret here, and that is that having effective human communication really is crucial to the success of a good, well-designed UI, but it's really something we're not thinking about. It's not something we're thinking about, and I really think that putting some thought into how to communicate to people effectively on a human level really is going to help us design better UI. So to get an appreciation of why this is important, I think a good way of looking at it is the traditional design process that most teams use. So usually what we do is, we come up with a project concept, maybe some sort of problem we're trying to solve. Usually what happens then is the developers will go out and figure out what the back end ought to look like, so they'll focus on the back end technology. At some point we start thinking about the UI itself. And one technique that's very common, I call it designing like a programmer. What very often will happen is programmers will take that back end technology and present the UI as kind of like a thin veneer over that back-end technology, kind of expecting that to be usable. Designers very often will do what I call designing or sketching a pile of features. So we'll have some sort of feature list. We'll try to figure out how physically we can put them on the page. And so either way, we end up with a design. If we're lucky, we have the opportunity to present it to users, get some sort of feedback, and get some sort of improvement. But if it doesn't really work well, if it's not really usable, we're kind of totally dependent upon help, documentation, and training to kind of make the product usable. If you think about this process, it really isn't all that good. We're kind of focused on the wrong things. We're focused on technologies, we're focused on features, we're focused on kind of like mechanical usability. We're kind of focused on using help and documentation to kind of fix everything for us. And so we really need to, for modern UI, we really need to get to that next level. And I think the best tools we have to take it to the next level are scenario-based design, which I'm going to cover a little tiny bit because it's not about scenario-based design, but I do want to address that because it is important. But also I want to focus on UI as a form of human communication. At the end of the day, I think that's what UIs are, is what we're doing is we're communicating to users in order to help them do tasks using our technologies. So here's the basic concepts that I'd like to present. So first of all, UI is a form of human communication. So I mentioned that one. So if we create UIs that are understandable, those are going to be usable UIs because users are going to be able to figure out what it is we're supposed to be able to do. And if you think about UIs from this point of view, everything on the screen is there to communicate something to somebody. It's all about effective human communication. So if you believe this, then it should be clear that effective human communication is really the simplest way to create usable UIs that are simple, intuitive, and help achieve the user's goals. And in fact, I believe that the quality of the user interface can be measured by how effectively it's communicating to the target users on a human level. So what I think then is that this is such an important part of the design effort that it really should be the thing that drives the design process. Usually the traditional process that I just kind of outlined, if any of this is thought about at all, it's usually kind of accidental. So I want to make this deliberate, and I think we can design the design process around the idea of trying to achieve these goals of effective human communication. And so then from the point of view of a writer, the interesting thing is that writers are experts at communicating to users. So that kind of suggests to me that writers have kind of an underappreciated role in the design process. That if it really is all about communication, we ought to actually go out of our way to put that into the process. And this should be something that's done from the very beginning, as opposed to the kind of more traditional approach where at the end of the process, where we have a product that's unusable, the writers come in and try to figure out how to explain it to users. I think modern software, that's no longer acceptable for modern software, that we should have self-explanatory UIs. People should be able to figure it out on their own. So my goals for the course then, the workshop, is first of all to kind of lay down some fundamental human communication design principles. Then I want to explore kind of what this means in terms of like interaction design and visual design. And of course, look at a lot of examples along the way. And then once that's done, I want to present more of a communication-focused design process and give some thinking in terms of how I think writers can play a more active, more important role in the design process, so that we're not just fixing things at the end, that we're actually baking in effective human communication into our designs.
Well, that's definitely an area that we more of us need to get involved with, and many of us are interested in. Your other topic is called intuitive UI, and so what can we expect there?
Well, the interesting thing about intuitive UI is everybody wants their UI to be intuitive. That's pretty much a goal for every UI project. The funny thing is, nobody knows what that term means. We talk about it all the time. We have no idea what it means. In fact, an interesting thing to try, if you're interested, is to actually ask people to define the term intuitive when they bring it up in conversation. So, you're talking to a user and they say, this UI is not intuitive. Ask them to define it. And the surprising thing is how weak those definitions are. We really don't know what this term means. So I think it's a valuable concept, but we can't really design for it if we don't really understand it. So in this particular talk, what I want to do is really focus on what this thing means. So I want to define it in terms of an operational definition that we can use to actually determine whether or not a UI is intuitive or not. Then I want to give the very specific attributes that are required to make a UI intuitive so that we know what to look for. And I find that this is very, very helpful because it gives us a more specific vocabulary of things to look for rather than this vague abstract term. Another thing I want to do is explore different levels of intuitiveness. What it means to be intuitive is kind of different at the interaction level than it is at the task level. So at the high task level, when you're trying to get a very complex task done, that takes an extra set of thinking in order to make that process intuitive. I also want to explore when it's okay to not be intuitive. Not everything has to be intuitive. There's a lot of UIs that aren't intuitive, and that's absolutely fine. But I want to make sure that that is deliberate rather than accidental. Very often it's accidental. And another thing I want to explore is kind of different levels of intuitiveness. So like, for example, something can be fully intuitive where people get it right away. One level below that is what I call sensible, where it's not really fully intuitive, but people are able to figure it out quickly and easily, so they're going to kind of consider it to be intuitive. So that would be kind of like a notch down. All the way at the bottom, though, in terms of the levels of what I'm looking for, is what I call trainable. We have to train people in order to use a product. That's kind of like the lowest level. That's not what we want to do. We want to avoid the need for training. And of course, what I want to do also is look at a lot of examples and maybe do some makeovers so we can take a UI that's not intuitive and look for how to apply this thinking, look for those elements that need to be there and be able to understand exactly how to communicate why it's not intuitive and how to fix it.
All right. Well, thanks for these previews. This gives us some good food for thought, and we'll definitely have some good discussions in Palm Springs. So thanks for taking the time to do this today.
Thank you very much, Joe, for the opportunity.
Bye bye.